and I am deeply and greatly looking forward to this. Dimitri Lascaris. He is a lawyer, journalist, and activist from Montreal, Canada. In 2020, Dimitri ran for leadership of the Green Party of Canada. You are the man I want to talk to. How you doing, Dimitri? You doing okay this morning?
I'm fine, Jamal. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Better that you are with me. Is it okay to say where you are? I don't want to.
Is it where?
Is it okay to say where you are? Yeah.
Oh, yes, that's fine.
Sure. Okay. How is it in Cuba? Are you in Havana? Which part of Cuba are you in?
I'm actually on the southern coast, just outside the city of Trinidad, which is, I think, about 75,000 people. It's very old. I think it's the third oldest city in Cuba, and it's beautiful here, and the people are, I've always been fond of the Cuban people, but they're clearly going through a very difficult period.
Yeah, the U.S. and those sanctions. Can you give us, before we get into any other part, just the effect that those sanctions have had on Cuba?
Well, the current principal problem with the sanctions, there are many, is that it's causing havoc with the electricity system. So the Cubans are having great difficulty obtaining parts that are needed to maintain their electricity infrastructure, fuel. And so there are consistent blackouts. Sometimes they can go on for many hours. Wow. But quite apart from that, of course, just normal food staples are difficult to access. Medicines are difficult to access. These are really crushing sanctions that I don't think really any aspect of their economy is spared by them. So it's impossible, really, whatever economic model the Cuban people choose, it's impossible for the economy to realize its potential in such circumstances. There's a debate going on here about how much of this is due to these sanctions and how much of this is due to flaws in the government and its practices and policies, and that's a debate that should be had. But no rational person would deny that these sanctions are having an enormously negative impact on the Cuban economy.
And the sanctions themselves, they're coming from America, but they're not capable of trading with other countries. It's like, are the sanctions going beyond America? They're going to other countries in addition to America. Forgive me, I don't know. I know we've passed sanctions on Cuba. And I know when I'm in other countries, I can get Cuban products in a way that I can't necessarily get it in America. So I just kind of assume that they were able to trade with other countries. How does it work in practice?
Well, as I understand it, the sanctions don't apply to third countries that choose to trade with Cuba. So, for example, Canada, where I come from, does have limited trade with Cuba. Canadians come here, quite a few actually, during the wintertime as tourists. So my understanding of the American sanctions is they're not secondary, which means that they apply to third countries and nationals of third countries that trade with Cuba. Yeah. But the fact that Cuba is, so close to the United States, it's a small island nation. The mere fact that the United States itself, which so dominates the economy of the Western Hemisphere, imposes these sanctions, has a dramatically negative impact on the country. And interestingly, there was a resolution. Every year there's a resolution of the United Nations General Assembly about these sanctions. And this year, only two countries, there was a resolution of the UN General Assembly condemning the sanctions and calling for the United States to end them. And only two countries voted against the resolution. The United States, correct. Yep. US and Israel. The eternal naysayers, there they were, and that's a measure of how unified the international community is in opposing what is really a form of economic warfare against an impoverished people.
It's outrageous. It's so spiteful.
If the American government actually cared about the Cuban people, it would not destroy their economy. I think any rational person would understand that.
Yeah, agreed. So let's talk about Trudeau. Trudeau is out. And I want to get to some of the reasons that Trudeau is out. I want to play this clip. This is Trudeau giving his farewell speech to I find this to be comical. I'm not sure why. I want to get your take on it, but this is his outing.
Over the holidays, I've also had a chance to reflect and have had long talks with my family about our future. Throughout the course of my career, any success I have personally achieved has been because of their support and with their encouragement. So last night over dinner, I told my kids about the decision that I'm sharing with you today. I intend to resign as party leader, as prime minister, after the party selects its next leader through a robust, nationwide, competitive process. Last night, I asked the president of the Liberal Party to begin that process. This country deserves a real choice in the next election, and it has become clear to me that if I'm having to fight internal battles, I cannot be the best option in that election.
How did he get so hated? I mean, he went in with a massive amount of popularity, and he is leaving just with complete recrimination at this point. Well, what happened? How did he fail so miserably?
Well, let's go back to the beginning. First of all, he's been around for 10 years, and in and of himself, that's a problem. But he came to power in 2015. I actually ran in that election for the Green Party.
That's right.
And one of the promises that he made right out of the gate, which he broke within a matter of months, it was a very, very important promise, was to deliver electoral reform. In this country, we have or in Canada, not where I am now, but in Canada, we have something called the first past the post system, which we inherited from Britain. And basically the way that works is, whoever finishes first in any particular riding, which is our equivalent of a congressional district, gets the seat. And, it's the number of seats or votes that the other candidates obtain, the losing candidates obtain, is an irrelevancy. They're basically wasted. So Canadians wanted, a majority of them, a system called proportional representation, which meant that the seats in Parliament would be allocated in proportion to the popular vote, roughly. Okay, and there are other Western countries that have this system. A number of them, actually. In Europe, I believe Australia has a proportional representation system, possibly New Zealand as well, so that it's the composition of Parliament reflects the popular will to a far greater degree than it does now. So now you can have a party in Canada's Parliament that gets 38% of the popular vote, and they get a majority of the seats, which is crazy. You can have even a large majority with less than 40% of the popular vote. So he, within a matter of a year, just broke that promise. It was really an important promise that brought him to power in 2015. Another thing is he came to power partly, sure, yes, he was telegenic and young, and he was full of optimism, and that certainly endeared him to a lot of Canadians. But he won that election handily because he was preceded by another prime minister who had been in office for a long time, Stephen Harper, and Canadians were sick of the man. He was a conservative, very much a neoliberal, neocon. So he benefited from that. And over time, people came to realize that Justin Trudeau is not only dishonest, because I just mentioned one promise he broke. There were numerous others. But also he was an empty suit. This is not a man who's very thoughtful. Sorry, it looks like the electricity just went out here. So I've gone back.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I'm sorry for the Cuban people. He over time, people came to understand who Justin Trudeau is, and Justin Trudeau really is, I would call him a neoliberal wolf in sheep's clothing. He's not, on social issues, he's progressive. But on economic issues, he continued to pursue policies that were very much like the conservative policies that favored the wealthy, that exacerbated inequality. He kept capitulating to demands, from the U.S. government and the right wing in this country to increase military spending. A report just came out tomorrow, which showed that in Ontario, the number of homeless people, might not seem big by U.S. standards, but it's a big number for Canada. In 2024 was over 85,000 people. Okay, and before it was much smaller, and it had gone up like 25% in 2 years.
Wow.
So if you look nationally, that's just Ontario, if you look nationally, the number could be well into the hundreds of thousands of people who are homeless. And I grew up in this country, and I walk around the major cities, and I see homeless people everywhere. Far more homeless people than I saw when I was a young man.
I thought Canada had a heavy social I'm sorry to interrupt. I thought they had a social safety net similar to Europe, like similar to like a Germany or a Denmark or Austria.
Yeah, I would say that we're kind of in between the German model or the Scandinavian model and the United States.
I see.
So
Okay.
it's kind of not quite as robust as the European model. And the European model is weakening as well. It's been degraded considerably.
Mhm.
When I'm in European cities, I see far more homeless people than I used to see. So all of these things accumulated, and there was just Trudeau fatigue as well. People just got tired of him. The sad news for Canadians is that the person who's poised to replace him is probably going to be considerably worse. This character, Pierre Poilievre, who's the Conservative Party leader. I fear for the future of the country, frankly.
Wow. So when is the next election supposed to take place?
Well, we don't have a date yet because the government hasn't fallen. The government has.
They just replaced it within the context of his own party.
Yeah, within his own party, I believe he plans to leave sometime within the next 2 to 3 months. The press reports are that the contest to replace him will be quite shortened. Normally, it's 3 to 6 months in the Liberal Party to select a new leader. They're probably looking at less than 2 months here. Sorry, 1 second.
Please, you can continue. I think he has frozen, and they may be having difficulties with the electricity and everything in Cuba. He mentioned before that they were having difficulties with the electricity. He may be having trouble with the signal also, especially if the lights went off. So I will watch him, and hopefully he can come back. I don't typically like to leave the frozen face because, he's about to collapse. All right. So one of the I don't think he's there with the lights out. They might have lost signal also. I've always wanted to go to Cuba. I've never had the opportunity to visit. But hopefully Daniel can come back. He is out. Okay, he's gone. So one of the funny things about Trudeau that I was going to get Daniel to hit on was this conversation that Donald Trump had. Because, Donald Trump doesn't just go after a political opponent. He humiliates political opponents. Like, it's not just, we're having a go at one another. It's my job is to make you look bad. So when it rains, it pours. Trump in an interview was talking about Trudeau, and he said this, which is comedic gold, but it is utterly brutal.
So I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call ended. Yeah. He was at Mar-a-Lago. We were having dinner talking about it. I said, you have to close up your borders because they're coming in the northern border too a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot. And drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in, maybe more importantly, drugs are pouring in at levels never seen before, 10 times what we had. They're just pouring in. We can't have open borders. And I said to the president of Mexico and to Justin Trudeau, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to put tariffs on your country at about 25%. So I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact,
he said he came in tears. He was in tears. He wept. He cried when he got here, and I told him what I was going to do to him. That is outrageous. Oh, you're back. Welcome back. I didn't think you were coming back. Thank you for coming back.
Sorry, the electricity issue is.
No, you're perfectly fine. I totally understood. I was showing the audience, and I'll show you this clip to get your take on this clip, because you pointed out that he kept catering to the U.S., like he kept folding and folding to the U.S. interests. Donald Trump said this about Trudeau, and I want to get your take on this. For one, it's funny because he said Trudeau came there in tears, but I want to get your take.
So I spoke with Justin Trudeau. In fact, he flew to Mar-a-Lago within about 15 seconds after the call ended. He was at Mar-a-Lago. We were having dinner talking about it. I said, you have to close up your borders because they're coming in the northern border too a lot. Not like the southern border, but they're coming in the Canadian border a lot. And drugs are pouring in. Almost as importantly, drugs are pouring in. Maybe more importantly, drugs are pouring in at levels never seen before, 10 times what we had. They're just pouring in. We can't have open borders. And I said to the president of Mexico and to Justin Trudeau, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to put tariffs on your country at about 25%. That's a
I mean, he is effectively bullying Canada in this way. For one, I don't believe Justin Trudeau was there in tears. But yeah, Justin Trudeau did show up in Mar-a-Lago pretty quickly when Donald Trump started throwing around those threats of tariffs.
Yeah.
How do you see this? What is your take on this? Because whether it's Trudeau or another president, if Trump is going to take this kind of hardball stance, I mean, for one, do you believe he's going to take this hardball stance? Two, are drugs and all of these other nefarious items pouring through the Canadian border in the way that Donald Trump is saying? Give me your thoughts. Give me your take on this?
Okay, so first of all, let's get real here. As long as there is high demand for drugs in the United States, the drugs are going to find a way into the country. That's the end of the story. So if you want to deal, you got to deal with the core causes of drug abuse and consumption and so forth. And one of the ways to deal with this issue is legalization. So to Trudeau's credit, in my opinion, he did legalize cannabis, pot. That was a sensible thing for him to do. Now there's quality control, and it's raising considerable tax revenue for the government, which the government needs. Whereas it's illegal, there's no quality control. It's going to get into the market anyways. It's going to be more expensive, and the government gets no tax revenue from it. Mm-hmm. So Trump's basic, view about how to stop drug abuse in the United States is fundamentally flawed. In any event, it is true that Trudeau did rush off. In fact, I commented on it at the time. I referred to him on social media as behaving like a vassal. What he should have done was he should have stood up and said, that would be a violation of the trade agreement, Mr. Trump. I mean, you would be violating the trade agreement, and Canada will exercise its legal options under the trade agreement. We'll go. By the way,
the trade agreement that he made. I mean, if you remember, the trade agreement that he signed himself.
Yeah. So, but now that's not to say that Donald Trump wouldn't do it anyways. He's capable of saying, well, to hell with the trade agreement, and we're just going to ignore any rulings by the NAFTA tribunal. And the problem here, Jamal, and I've been talking about this for years, is that successive governments in Canada have made us increasingly economically dependent upon the United States. It's now by far the largest trading partner. And I mean, it counts for a huge proportion of our international trade. And if the United States decided to impose 25% across the board tariffs, this would have a very severe impact on the Canadian economy. And what the answer to that is that Canada should diversify its trading relationships. It should, for example, trade more with countries like China, trade more with the EU, trade more with Russia. But no, we've followed slavishly the desire of the successive American governments for us to, concentrate our trade with the United States, and this leaves us vulnerable. And so this is a problem now that any Canadian leader is going to have to deal with, notwithstanding the protections under the trade agreement with the United States. But so this is really a hole that Justin Trudeau and other Canadian prime ministers have dug for Canada, and it ain't going to be easy to get out of it.
Well, speaking of that, annexation is the other thing that Donald Trump was talking about, where effectively saying he wants to annex Canada and use quote unquote economic force in order to do so. For one, where do you think all of this is coming from? I mean, my take on this, and I want to get yours, is that Trump is looking out at the world and he sees larger threats than what the United States was dealing with prior. Now, these threats are created. I don't believe for a moment that Russia, China, all of these countries are necessarily antagonistic to America. We kind of make them that way through our policy. But nevertheless, this is the way he's a neocon. This is the way he looks out at the world. and he says, I want to make Fortress America. And I think he's looking at this kind of supercontinent idea of Mexico, Canada, and the United States being this kind of one thing led under this kind of American hegemony of the region. I mean, give me your take on this. For one, do you think that's right? Do you think something else is going on here in the way that he's thinking about this? And all of this thought and talk about economic force against Canada. Give me your thoughts on this.
Look, who knows what's going on in the brain of Donald Trump, right? We're all trying to read his mind. That's a challenge. But I'll give you my best sense of what's going on, Jamaro. I think that Donald Trump understands fundamentally that the United States can no longer project its power internationally, globally, anywhere near to the same extent that it did previously. And I think this is one of the reasons why he's talked a lot, and let's hope he's serious about bringing the Ukraine war to an end.
Right.
Recently you may have seen that he even shared a video of Jeffrey Sachs.
Yes.
Right. That was
Yeah.
wild. I couldn't believe he did that. So he's apparently alienated Netanyahu so much that Netanyahu isn't going to come to his inauguration. That's what I understand. So that's a sign that he also understands that things in West Asia have gotten out of control and that this is not serving the interests of the United States. So he doesn't want to be the guy, I think, who is seen to be pulling back the United States and ending the era of U.S. global hegemony. So he's trying to compensate for the loss that ultimately he's going to have to recognize the United States has suffered in Ukraine and, to a degree also in West Asia by expanding the scope of American power and sovereignty in the Western Hemisphere. This is his way of, preserving the image of America. And it's not just a question of imagery. It actually would considerably strengthen the United States if the government in Washington had complete control. Right now, it has partial control over the resources of Canada. Principally, and here we're talking about oil, a lot of mineral wealth, and fresh water, which the United States is going to need increasingly. So if the United States had direct control over these resources rather than indirect control through its vassal in Ottawa, that would strengthen the United States. Same thing if the United States had direct control over the Panama Canal, if it absorbed Greenland, which has potentially vast wealth, natural resource wealth as well. And so it's both I think from Trump's perspective, a pragmatic way to enhance American power, but also a way to compensate from the loss of prestige when he signs that deal with Russia that effectively acknowledges that the United States has been defeated there, and ultimately may end up doing a similar deal in West Asia. So I think this is a way to compensate.